Hello everyone. In today's video, we will be learning about the prenatal growth of mandible. The head of a human embryo at 4 weeks is characterized by a frontal eminence containing the growing brain and the cardiac prominence. Now both the structures are separated by a tiny depression called the stomodium, which is lined with the buccopharyngeal membrane. Now this membrane breaks down at around 4 weeks of intrauterine life. Around this time, the pharyngeal arches are also laid down. Now, each pharyngeal arch has 4 components. First is the neural component, second, the vascular component, third is the muscular component, and fourth is the central cartilage. The mandible or the lower jaw, which we will be discussing today, is the derivative of the first pharyngeal arch, and therefore this arch is also called as the mandibular arch. Now let's have a look at its derivatives. So the neural component of first pharyngeal arch is the trigeminal nerve. The vascular component is the maxillary artery. Apart from this, the muscles derived from this arch include the muscles of mastication, tensor tympani, tensor villi palatini, mylohyoid muscle, and the anterior belly of digastric. And the principal cartilage of this arch is the Meckel's cartilage, which plays a very vital role in the mandibular morphogenesis, and therefore it is also referred to as the primary lower jaw. Now let's understand this Meckel's cartilage in detail. It was first described by German anatomist Johann Friedrich Meckel in year 1820. It is basically a cartilage rod that runs along the jaw from the ear to the midline. By around 7th week, this cartilage can be seen as a paired hyaline cartilage surrounded by a perichondrium with the cartilage of opposite sides separated by a mesenchymal tissue in between. The first structure to develop in the premodium of the lower jaw is the mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve, which induces osteogenesis by the process of neurotropism. This is then followed by an ectomesenchymal condensation in the area of lower jaw. Now most of the mandible ossifies by the process of intramembranous ossification except for the condylar process, the coronoid process, and the symphysis, which develop from the secondary cartilages. A primary ossification center appears in the surrounding mesenchymal tissue at the region of bifurcation of the inferior alveolar nerve into its mental and incisive branches. The mandibular bone plate then extends downwards, backwards, forward, and upwards by the process of intramembranous ossification. Between 8th and 12th week, the mandibular growth accelerates and the mandibular length increases. And finally, the ossification stops at the point which becomes the future lingula. The secondary accessory cartilages appear between 10th and 14th week to form the head of condyle, part of coronoid process, and the mental protuberance where endochondral type of ossification takes place. The condylar cartilage is initially cone-shaped, which is subsequently replaced by bone except for the upper end, which persists as a growth cartilage, whereas the coronoid process and the mental region ossify completely. In embryos between 13th and 16th week, chondrocytes can be identified which degenerate the Meckel's cartilage eventually. According to its fate, this cartilage can be divided into a proximal or posterior end, an intermediate or central portion, and a distal or anterior end. The central part largely degenerates except for the posterior end, which forms the anterior ligament of Malleus and the sphenomandibular ligament, while the distal or anterior end forms the mandibular symphysis in the form of mental ossicles, and the proximal or posterior end forms the two ear ossicles, that is Malleus and Incus. You can easily remember the remnants of Meckel's cartilage using the mnemonic on your screen, that is AIMS, where A stands for anterior ligament of Malleus, I for Incus and Malleus, M for the mental ossicles, and S for the sphenomandibular ligament. I hope you understood today's concept. For more informative lectures, stay tuned.